Hello, I'm Claire Smith and welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about Valentine's Day. You may or may not already know that Valentine's Day is on Tuesday this coming week, and I just got reading about Valentines and went down a complete rabbit hole, and I just thought I'm going to make a video about where Valentine's Day comes from, and I'm also going to scent various aspects of Valentine's Day. I already did one of these videos all about Halloween and people seem to really enjoy that, so I thought I'd try it with Valentine's as well. So if you do like this kind of content, then please do consider subscribing if you haven't done already, and also please like this video if you do end up enjoying this video. So firstly, who was St Valentine? What did he do? How come he's a saint? So actually the Catholic Church recognises 3 different people as being called either Valentine or Valentinus, and actually 2 of those seem to fit really nicely with our modern day beliefs of what a Valentine should be. So the first one is a priest from the 3rd century back in Rome, and he was someone who was around during the reign of Claudius II. Claudius II decided in his wisdom that single men made better soldiers than men who were married, and so he decided to outlaw marriage for soldiers. The priest Valentine decided that actually this was totally unfair and decided to marry soldiers in secret to their sweethearts, and when the emperor found out, he put Valentine to death. So in this way Valentine became St Valentine. Another story puts Valentine as someone who was campaigning against the harsh conditions in Roman prisons, and actually he ended up in prison himself, and while he was there he fell in love with a young girl, and this young girl used to visit him in confinement and is widely believed to have been the jailer's daughter. So he's said to have ended up writing her love letters and signing them as being from your Valentine, which is clearly an expression that is widely used around Valentine's Day today. Clearly the truth around the Valentine legends from the 3rd century is murky, to say the least, and so we don't really know who St Valentine really was, but there are several options out there and all sound quite romantic. He's seen as a heroic and romantic figure, and was actually one of the most popular saints of the Catholic Church back in the Middle Ages in France and in England. So how would I scent St Valentine? Well, of course I'm going to choose a rose fragrance for St Valentine. There's no other option, is there? So this one is Chopard Love. This fragrance is a really rich, warm, deep, even sort of slightly spiced rose in a way. A warm, spicy rose, not really like a hot, spicy rose. And this one is in this beautiful red glass bottle. Even the top to this bottle is glass. And actually this fragrance has a slight vintage nod to it, almost. It has a very strong patchouli note in the base. It's a very woody rose fragrance, I'd say, this one. And it also has a touch of sweetness. There's a bit of honey at the end of the fragrance, and you just get that sort of a mild sweetness. But I'd say this one is a really long-lasting fragrance. It's a really good choice for Valentine's. It just makes you smell just so rosy. I don't think I've got a rosier fragrance than this one. I think this fragrance just makes me think of some kind of magical elixir made by some kind of Roman priest or something like that. It's something that makes me think of love potions. It's something that I really can see a Roman wearing because it has all those different types of rose in it. And that to me reflects where the Romans went during their history. It has Bulgarian rose very prominently, but also has Typh rose from the Middle East. And I think that just maybe reflects how the Romans conquered all these different lands and took all these plants from all over the world and brought them back to Italy for themselves to enjoy. So this one is Chopard Love. So next, why do we celebrate Valentine's in February? Why is it on the 14th of February? So the obvious answer might be because we think that maybe St Valentine died around the 14th of February or was buried around the 14th of February. But actually, the more sinister reason is probably the reason that Christmas is where it is. It's because the Catholic Church wanted to cover up a pagan festival. The Catholic Church actually wanted to Christianise the pagan festival of Lupercalia. So Lupercalia was actually celebrated on the Ides of February, which is the 15th of February. And Lupercalia was a festival dedicated to the founders of Rome, Romulus and Remus, and also to the Roman god of agriculture, Faunus. There is a myth around Romulus and Remus that they were cared for in a cave by a she-wolf when they were babies, and they suckled from the she-wolf, and that's how they kept alive. So actually, on Lupercalia, the Roman priests would go to this particular cave where they believed that Romulus and Remus were brought up by the she-wolf, and they would sacrifice various animals. So they would sacrifice goats for fertility and dogs for purification. Weirdly, the priests would actually tear strips from the goat carcasses and then go into the town and slap women very gently, hopefully, with these goat hides. And actually women welcomed this because they believed that it made them more fertile during the coming year. The priests would also slap the fields of the crops to try and make those more fertile as well in the coming year. There's also a legend that says later in that same day of Lupercalia, men would place their names into urns and they would be picked out to be paired with various different women. And actually many of these pairings would actually result in marriage. So for Lupercalia, I'm going to reflect the stripping of the hides and those women being slapped with those hides to make them more fertile. So the fragrance I'm going to choose is clearly going to be a leather fragrance, and the fragrance is Orchid Leather by Van Cleef & Arpels. So this is a very slightly smoky, incensey leather, but actually in the dry down this turns into more of like almost a black licorice kind of leather to me. It's smooth and sensuous, and it's something that's very seductive feeling to me. It's got a slight fruitiness to it, and it's also slightly resinous and fragrant and sweet almost. It's something that I would absolutely love to smell on anybody. I think this would smell absolutely delicious on a man, very, very Moorish, and I think it would be absolutely perfect for a wintry date night. Actually, for Van Cleef & Arpels, this is a surprisingly strong and long-lasting fragrance. So that's Van Cleef & Arpels Orchid Leather. So back to Lupercalia. So Lupercalia actually survived the initial Christianization of the Roman Empire, but actually by the 5th century, Lupercalia had been banned and turned into Valentine's Day by the Pope at the time, Pope Gelasius. It wasn't until much, much later though, in the Middle Ages, that Valentine's Day became associated with love. Actually, traditionally, the middle of February was deemed to be the day when the mating season for birds began. This added to the feeling that Valentine's should be a time for love. And actually one of the first people to write about Valentine's is Geoffrey Chaucer, one of the most famous Middle English poets. He actually wrote a poem in 1375 talking about Valentine's Day as a romantic celebration. Actually, Valentine's greetings have been popular since the Middle Ages, and the oldest known Valentine that we have written down is one from the 1400s. So Charles, the Duke of Orleans, back in 1415, wrote a Valentine to his wife while he was imprisoned in the Tower of London. Several years later, it's believed that Henry V employed a poet to write a greeting to his future wife, Catherine of Valois. So the fragrance I'm going to choose to reflect Chaucer talking about Valentine's Day in his poems and also those love letters is a fragrance that makes me think of paper and libraries. So this fragrance is Whispers in the Library by Replica Fragrances. And really, this is a vanilla fragrance. That's what this fragrance is. It's a woody vanilla fragrance, but it just has this sort of slight pepperiness with those woodsy notes that makes you think of paper. It makes you think of old books, dusty books in a library. And that's kind of magical in a way, isn't it? It's something that takes you somewhere. So this fragrance, I think, if you don't want to smell like you're wearing a dessert, but you still like vanilla, this is a kind of fragrance that you should be looking for. Woody vanilla is probably something that's more suitable for you. Having said that, I do think the vanilla here is very much like a vanilla extract kind of vanilla, like in Want by T Squared. It really has that rich, strong feel about it rather than something that's more powdery like in Van Cleef & Arpels Orchidée Vanille. I think this fragrance works because it's a good balance between something with a bit of a story, the thinking about the libraries and the books, but it's also a very wearable fragrance. Woody vanillas just are. And actually this is quite a soft fragrance, it's quite close to skin. It's an EDT fragrance, so it's not that long lasting, but I think it's one of those that would be great on an intimate date night. It's something where you're going to be snuggling up to someone and you just smell very cozy and, familiar basically. So Whispers in the Library by Replica Fragrances is my choice for Chaucer and also for literature. So who else do you associate with Valentine's other than St Valentine? Well, most people would associate Cupid with Valentine's. So Cupid is actually a Roman god, and he has his own roots in the Greek god Eros, the god of love. So it's best not to look too closely at Greek gods' family trees because they can be a little bit disturbing. But actually the origins of Eros are quite debated. So some people say he's the son of Nyx and Erebus. Other people say he's the son of Aphrodite and Eris. And other people say he's the son of Aphrodite and Zeus, which is particularly freaky because that would make Zeus both his dad and his grandfather. So according to Greek poets, Eros was somebody who was quite a muscly person. He was quite an athletic person, quite handsome, and he was immortal. And he would shoot these golden arrows to try to make people fall in love with other people. But he would also shoot leaden arrows if he wanted somebody to feel aversion for somebody else. So he was kind of a little bit troublesome and a little bit of a joker, but not as much as Cupid is seen as. And Cupid is somebody who is pictured often as a baby, almost like a cherub, and is really not muscly or athletic. So really there's been a huge shift by the way that Eros was represented to the way that Cupid is represented. So how would I scent Cupid? Well, he's a cheeky person, isn't he? I think there's only really one super cheeky fragrance that I know of, and I'm going to choose Kayali's Lovefest Burning Cherry. So this fragrance is just pure fun. It's something that Cupid would wear, I think. And Burning Cherry is very appropriately named, actually. I think people were comparing this one a lot to Tom Ford's Lost Cherry when it first came out. And I get why people would do that, because in the first 5-10 seconds, there is a feeling of Lost Cherry. It definitely has that almondy cherry, fresh cherry kind of Bakewell feel to it. But that really is lost quite quickly, and it turns into more of a smoky, woody cherry. There is also a touch of raspberry later on in the fragrance, and that really adds a lot of fruitiness to it. But ultimately, in the dry down, it's all about that smoky, woody cherry with this beautiful, really intoxicating musk to it. It's really quite an addictive, musky fragrance in the dry down, this one. Along with that smoky, woody cherry, it's just delicious. And I think it's something that definitely I can see Cupid enjoying. This fragrance is Kayali. It's going to be short-lived, and I think this one is definitely something that would layer really well with something like Invite Only, possibly also with Vanilla 28, or even with the musk fragrance from Kayali. I think this one is just addictive and is something that would work really well for Valentine's. It's just a really fun, flirty fragrance. That's Kayali's Lovefest Burning Cherry. So actually in the UK, by the middle of the 18th century, Valentines had become quite popular. People were buying gifts for each other, people were writing little notes to each other, even friends would write little notes to each other as well as lovers. And by Victorian times, printed cards were more of a thing. They were things that became cheaper, and they were more popular because Victorians were quite stuffy people and they found it difficult to express their emotions. In fact, expressing emotions in public was really frowned upon. So if you could send someone some flowers, or if you could send someone a little note or a card, then that was done for you, wasn't it? It wasn't something where you had to embarrass yourself in public. So these cards became popular because postage rates became cheaper in Victorian times. There was a national postal service established in 1841, and that just meant that sending letters became more affordable to more people. It wasn't all fun and roses though in Victorian times, because Vinegar Valentines became more popular. If you haven't heard of Vinegar Valentines, these Valentines were sent to people as kind of mockery. So it would either be sort of, just gently pulling someone's leg about something, or it would be quite sassy, some of these attacks on people's personalities. Sometimes there were particular cards sent to particular people in certain professions to basically say how they were not liked or even hated. It was really quite a savage way to go about Valentine's, really. So later on, suffragettes were actually targeted by these Vinegar Valentines cards, and that was because they were perceived to have a hatred of men, and so they were targeted by society basically for their own beliefs that women should have equal rights to men. So in the US, Valentine's cards were generally more jokey, up until the 19th century actually. Esther Howlands is known as the mother of Valentines, and she was the one who brought the type of Valentine's cards that she saw in Europe over to America. And that really popularised the more soppy side of Valentine's. That's the side of Valentine's that we see now, the more romantic side of Valentine's. Before that, people in the US were sending quite mocking Valentine's cards, quite comical or funny Valentine's cards. But after Esther Howlands had popularised that different style of Valentine's, that all changed. And actually nowadays, Valentine's is second only to Christmas in the number of cards sent around that particular holiday. So Esther Howland's cards often featured ribbons and lace, and actually I'm going to choose a fragrance that really makes me think of sort of vintage dress-up, vintage pin-ups, and just sort of Victorian women generally, really, even though it is a modern fragrance. So this one is Insolence by Guerlain. So this fragrance, even though it is a fun, fruity violet fragrance, it is powdery, it does have that touch of makeup-iness about it. And this is a fragrance that just makes me think of an elegant Victorian lady powdering herself in her boudoir, eating violet candies. For such a delicate floral fragrance, the violet is surprisingly loud in this fragrance, and it's incredibly strong as well. This is not a fragrance you want more than 1 or 2 sprays of, because it can just be overwhelming. This fragrance has an incredibly vintage feel to it, and it's something that reaches almost soapiness at points for me. Doesn't quite get there, but it's sort of teetering on the edge of something that could be perceived as a Victorian soap. Despite being a slightly vintage smelling, it is a very young, very joyful fragrance. It's such a vintage mashup, this one. It makes me think of steampunk. It's very distinctive and it's very love it or hate it. So that's Insolence by Guerlain. So now let's bring Valentine's right into modern times. So how is it celebrated today around the world? Well, in Japan, Valentine's is celebrated on the 14th of February, but actually it's not Valentine's as we know it, because only women give gifts to men, not the other way around. And that's because the Japanese have another day called White Day, which they celebrate on the 14th of March, when men give gifts to women. And actually this is thought to have been the result of a mistranslation when Valentine's Day was popularised in Japan by a chocolate company. In Finland and Estonia, Valentine's is actually thought of as something that's more for friendship. So everybody, friends, family, lovers, they all give each other gifts. It's definitely something that's more to do with friendship than anything else. In the Philippines, Valentine's has become a really popular day for mass weddings. So literally hundreds of people will get married in one particular ceremony all together as some kind of huge celebration of Valentine's. And finally, in Ghana, Valentine's is all about chocolate. So the Ghanaian government declared Valentine's Day their National Chocolate Day. And that's because cocoa is a really vitally important crop to the Ghanaian economy. And so the Ghanaian government wanted to promote chocolate consumption. So the final fragrance I'm going to choose for Ghana and for chocolate. So the fragrance I'm going to choose is Akro's Dark. So this fragrance really changed my mind about chocolate fragrances. I always thought they were juvenile, I thought they were kiddie kind of fragrances, I thought they were too sweet. This one though just blew me away. So this one is a dark chocolate fragrance. It really smells like a really dark chocolate bar to begin with a slight powdery cocoa feel and a slight nuttiness to it as well. The nuttiness is really most prominent in the opening of the fragrance, and there's even some notes that aren't listed that I seem to smell anyway. So I smell something that resembles perhaps a black cherry and something that resembles something like a rum. There's definitely an alcoholic feeling to this fragrance, but it's just a very intoxicating, very addictive kind of fragrance. As this dries, it becomes a little bit more powdery, so it goes more towards cocoa rather than chocolate bar, but it still is a very dark feeling cocoa and a little bit on the bitter side of cocoa rather than the sweet side. I think this also has a really growing presence of patchouli in it in the dry down. So in the dry down, you get more of an earthy patchouli feel to this fragrance, and that really adds to that powdery cocoa feel. In the air though, this just smells like dark chocolate, and I think actually if you were on a date night with someone, if it was Valentine's, you would smell absolutely gorgeous wearing this one. Whoever you are, I just can't see the other person with you on date night not loving it. So that's Akro's Dark. So that's the final fragrance in this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, then please press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. How would you scent Valentine's Day? What are you going to wear for Valentine's Day? Do you even celebrate Valentine's Day? Did you know about St Valentine, and did you know about how Valentine's is celebrated around the world? Please let me know down below, and let me know anything else that you know about Valentine's Day that I might not know. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.